Hello, hello. This is Are We Woke Yet? Your
We're
favorite
back.
podcast. And today we're going to talk about mind control. And this is something Leo should probably talk about it first a little bit more because it was not my choice to talk about it. It was
Yeah.
his idea. So, what inspired you to talk about mind control?
Now, last week I just was mind blown by this article that I read, and it was about this uh, project that the CIA conducted called the Gateway Experience, and it just blew my mind. And I was just reading into it and reading of people who were part of this project and what they did. It just blew me away. It's
So just
unbelievable
to make it
stuff.
clear, though, the gateway experience, it's not a conspiracy, right? It's something that actually happened. Um,
Yeah, it's like a declassified report. It's
yeah.
out there for everyone to see, and they do those Freedom of Information Act, and I think it's part of release that they did recently.
Yeah, I think before you tell us more about it, because I'm also still quite confused as to what they even attempted to do. I think it's
It's
important
crazy,
to
yeah.
say we're not only going to talk about mind control in a very literal sense. We are going to talk about two of the CIA's most famous or infamous projects on mind control. But then we're
Yeah,
also going to move into kind of whether we're controlled as a society by the government, by the media. We're going to talk about ideology and propaganda world post 9/11 and advertising. So yeah, it's not going to be just a bunch of stories about, say, agents trying to control our minds.
yeah. It all starts very crazy, but then it all becomes very real. So
I mean, I
the
actually think the experiment part isn't that crazy. I think what's actually
yeah,
crazy is how we're being controlled in our everyday life. Like that's the scary
yeah.
part. The crazy part maybe, but the
That
scary
realization is a crazy one. We're going to talk about it. But why don't we start with
project.
the article that I mentioned,
Yes. Okay.
right?
So tell us,
About the gateway experience.
yes, and what did they try to do? Like, how did they even try to control human mind?
Yeah, it's very complex. And like the articles by the history of it, which is fascinating. The people who were behind this project, and also the philosophical and scientific explanations that were being researched. Um, and it details all the experiments that they conducted. And then it goes on to some of the crazy ramifications that this project might have had. But I thought it would be interesting to start with the philosophy and the scientific um, backing um, so, basis for this project. So we can start with the philosophical ones.
Mhm.
Is essentially based on this thing that a lot of people call the two worlds view. So the two worlds view is a problem that was first, or maybe not first, but prominently raised by Immanuel Kant. And he talked about how consciousness, which is our awareness of the environment, is structured by certain categories inherent to the human mind. So things like space and time, these are notions that structure our awareness of things, right? They underpin our awareness of everything.
Mhm.
Um, and Kant thought that this raised a problem because you have to ask yourself then, if space and time and all these categories is how I see things, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's how things really are, right? So there's a distinction there, and that's very important. Like so that's basically the philosophical problem that's behind the project, the two worlds problem. And then what I found interesting is that the physicists who were behind this project, they also understood this problem because I was talking about consciousness, and they see consciousness as essentially a representation, basically, of impulses that were almost like electrical impulses. They're waves, essentially, that hit our senses, and then our brain represents that, right? And these scientists, these physicists behind this project, they all understood consciousness as just a chain of sort of waves and frequencies that get represented by our brain through sort of more uh, wave patterns as well. And essentially what they talk about is the same problem, is the same division between the way we perceive things.
Yeah.
We perceive things as, say, like solid or like in a relation of time. And this is all a product of a certain representation of our brain and things as they really are, which is just, as I was saying, like these endless chains of electrical waves and hitting objects that then emit light and reflect light in so many other ways. So that's reality as it really is. It's like what you get with both philosophical and scientific explanations is this idea that there's something that's more real than we perceive, essentially. So that's a two worlds problem.
Do you know
Um,
how it's different from hypnosis? Like, or do they explain that?
Yeah, so like that's when the hypnosis talk and the hemi-sync talk comes in, because
Okay.
with this scientific understanding, you get this idea, right, that what you have is essentially brain waves, synapses, um, representing things to us, right?
Mhm.
And essentially the question that these scientists, these physicists ask themselves is, what if the frequencies of these particular waves could be altered, right? What if through, what ultimately is sound therapy that they were studying, um, what if we could alter the particular uh, brain waves that construct our consciousness so it can move beyond space and time, right? That's what they were studying, basically.
That's very
and
interesting.
and I found that fascinating, and it's quite hard to like wrap your head around all these like concepts at first, but that's what's really behind the experience that they were talking about.
Because it sounds a bit like a way more elaborate thing, because you know how sometimes students, or I don't know, people in general, when they study languages or study before an exam, some people will try to like listen to things in their sleep and put their headphones on
Yeah,
to try and remember, but obviously without the knowledge behind the experiment and like special waves that would need to enter your brain, you can't really do that. So I feel like that's just like
yeah,
an elaborate way of doing it that actually works, because it
essentially, yeah.
did it or did it not, or we don't know.
Well, like that's the thing, because it's actually like, if anyone wants to try it, it's out there, like you can just try doing it
It's on Spotify,
yourself. And
right? There is a whole playlist on Spotify.
yeah,
Because
I use the one that's on SoundCloud,
the guy who's
and
behind
it's,
it is called Bob Monroe, right? And there is his books that you could go and read um, about
yeah,
the experiments, and then you can also listen to this like
we
sounds.
can probably we can probably post the link for
Yeah, we
the
can put
files
it
in
in
the
on our
description
YouTube
later.
description box.
We're gonna do that, and it's on SoundCloud.
I tried it. I'm too
And
scared.
yeah, I just came back from it, basically, and it was one of the craziest things that ever happened to me. And like, I'm not exaggerating, it was really, really intense. And so I went on the SoundCloud app, and I just looked for the Hemi Sing Bob Monroe files. I just clicked on the first one, and it like starts with like it's like the sound of waves, the ocean
Wait,
just
I have a
hitting.
question. Did you come into it as a skeptic, or did you kind of expect to do something for you?
Yeah, like like with all the hypnosis talk and mind control, I was always very skeptical. Like, I never thought of these things as
It
real.
sounds
I
crazy.
never thought someone could just go to the future and like time travel like that.
Mhm.
But like after reading this, and especially after experiencing like the glimpse of it through the tapes, uh, like I'm way more open to it now. Like, it's crazy. Cause like, what do you think? Like, are you like a skeptic towards these things?
I don't really know. I feel like, yeah, I can't, I don't really have an opinion on it yet, I feel like. But
Yeah,
I would have to see it to believe it. And well, mind control, when I think of mind control, I think of someone completely overtaking my mind and programming every move I'm gonna make. And I'm not sure
yeah,
this is something I believe in. But then things we're going to talk about later, like the use of truth serum in terrorist interrogations post 9/11,
this
like,
is actual mind control, right?
yeah, these are things that will make you
Yeah,
reveal things about yourself that you
yeah,
wouldn't willingly do if you were
yeah,
sober or not under the influence of these drugs.
yeah,
But and then also, I would say, yeah, planting memories in someone's head is sort of a mind control, because then you might act upon those memories in a way you
yeah.
have acted
But
before.
like, what about the hypnosis thing? Do you believe like people could be hypnotized, or
Oh yeah, for
would you
sure.
think that like there's some type of sound therapy? Because that's what they say, like that this sound therapy, the Bob Monroe tapes. When you listen to them, and I felt this extremely tangible to me. uh, it's like your whole body just vibrates on a different level. It's crazy. I was just lying in my bed and I just felt my body vibrating differently. Like, and I was just listening to sound. Uh, and I definitely had like visual patterns formation and all of that. So I could see how uh, the whole talk of transcending the dimension that we live in and accessing areas where space and time don't really apply. Like, that sounds a bit crazy and all, but like I could start seeing how it happens. And it's crazy because like the guy who, and I think it's actually Bob Monroe who's narrating the
Yeah.
tapes. So he starts the tape like there are these sounds I was talking about that's like waves hitting sand at the beach, and after a little bit of that, like he just starts talking of um consciousness being something greater than yourself, and how it can travel to places and you're in control of it. And it's like it all sounds a bit nonsensical, but like it sort of feels like he's guiding you to think that already, and it really takes you there. And for the like 5 minutes that I was into it, I felt it,
But you
and I
know,
think that's what they were studying.
I think I'm a skeptic when it comes to it being used on a mass scale. So, because a crucial part of it is consent, right? At some point, you need to consent to this experiment or consent to putting yourself in a
Yeah, for sure. Like,
where this would happen. So you already, well, even if they don't tell you that this is what's going to happen, I don't know, there's some level of interaction.
yeah,
And I don't know, it just seems, I don't know, I kind of think about it as in like a horror way. Like, I don't know, people all of a sudden, these tapes are spread all across the world, and
mm,
our TVs are playing it, and it's on the radio in
yeah.
the background, and that's how we all get mind controlled, you know? But
You know what I was thinking? Like, I was thinking that like doing this to someone, of course, it's like what you were saying. It's a violation of human rights. You can't do this to someone who's unwilling to do this. But like potentially, there's even a bigger violation that's involved in this, and that's like uh, if you imagine like, and this is where it gets like conspiratorial, and but we don't know if that's what they were trying to do. Imagine if you just had people in society who were capable of exploring these capabilities and were hired by the government to, I don't know, access certain spaces. And this would basically act as the biggest form of social espionage you could ever think of. Because if you tell people that there's these, psychic cops in society, basically, and they just monitor the thoughts of everyone, and they're just everywhere all the time. It just becomes like the
Self-governing.
perfect big brother, essentially. So like it would be the ultimate form of mind control to have people hired by the government, trying to implement these things. I don't know exactly the reason why they were trying to study this. And there's actually like a fascinating fact that the article talks about.
You know
So
what's interesting? Well,
this page 24 of the report, of the CIA report that was leaked, it ends on a massive cliffhanger. And it's something like, the potential
I think I have
implications
it written
for
somewhere.
this project.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, I have it written somewhere. It says that the report is missing page 25. The bottom
yeah,
page, the bottom of the page 24 reads, "And the eternal thought of concept of self, which results from this self-consciousness, serves the," and it ends.
serves the purpose of, da-da-da.
And it doesn't say of to what, and then it picks up on page 26, 3 sections
And
back.
that's what's scary about it. Like, what if they're actually trying to come up with some crazy
Well,
psychic police force that's like the biggest, espionage sci-fi.
it is a conspiracy, but also
Yeah,
in other project we're going to talk about, MK Ultra, there is also a lot of documentation missing. But part of the reason for it is because the guy behind the experiment did it illegally, and he didn't want to tell people about what happened. So
right.
when the public actually found out about MK Ultra, most of the documents have already been destroyed because he didn't want to go to jail or suffer the consequences of the illegal experiments he's been conducting. So I think
Right.
I think a lot of these times when the reports and pages go missing, it's possible that there's like a conspiracy there, and someone actually has it and there is a secret to it.
Yeah.
But it's also possible that sometimes on these pages there are just things that were very illegal. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
and if they were leaked, people who were
Or
in the
super, like, they're probably not even illegal. They're just like plainly like the most
evil.
ethically wrong things you could probably do. You know, like I don't know, because when you're talking about, because you're gonna talk about that as well. Like, I'm not sure if that's MK Ultra, but is that what they were trying to do? Like, implant false memories? Was that
No,
we were talking about? That's not MK Ultra, right?
experiments, psychological experiments.
Yeah. So like, but anyways, like any sort of uh project by the CIA that involves just like playing with people's heads in this way, it's just like it makes me extremely uncomfortable just thinking about it.
Well, you know what's interesting? Because yeah, we're talking about CIA, and it just seems like it doesn't really affect us directly because it's just something secret agency happening in the States. But what I found really crazy is that I was looking into this report and unethical advertising forms, and there was this study done in a supermarket when the subliminal advertising, which is like hidden messages in different ads, it was used in music. So the music that was playing in the store had like hidden messages of "don't steal, stealing is bad," and
Really?
so people wouldn't consciously pay attention to it. I'm not really sure if it was like on a
That
lower,
was in the music
yeah, it was
somehow?
in the music. It didn't really go on to say if it was just like a quieter version along with the music or as it was in the lyrics,
Yeah.
but it would play on the loop in the store, and the store actually saw like a 70% drop in crime rate in shopping.
That's crazy because like what you're talking about is basically what these guys were studying is the effect of sound, if you like,
Yeah.
on our consciousness. It's just that uh, on the CIA level, they were thinking about using it on a different scale, I think. But yeah, for sure, like uh, they talk about this.
I think subliminal advertising is now banned in most countries for that reason because you don't consent to it.
Yeah,
You know?
like I could experience the power of sound. Like sound has the power to like literally make your whole body vibrate to a scale that you have no idea what it's like. So like listen to these tapes to feel what I felt, and you'll see like and then I don't know, like if they're just and it feels like, literally what it feels like is if someone just took a cold glass of water, opened your head, and just threw cold water on your brain, and your brain is just like going crazy all over the place because of these sounds you're hearing. And it's like, if they're doing this subliminally, if they're studying this to like control, or sell this technology to like people's companies, I don't know, like, if we can't know, of course, because they cut off that page, but it's fucking crazy, man, the power of sound.
Yeah, it is very, very.
And I was very skeptical about before listening to this. I was like, I wasn't giving shit to these tapes. I wasn't expecting much from them, really. Um, so yeah, like I'm just gonna put it out there. Be careful as well with these tapes. They might make you a little bit crazy. But yeah, for those who want to try it, it's I was just too curious. Like I couldn't stop myself.
I think all of it is
Yeah.
quite crazy because you've also sent me a few more articles. One of them was about astral projection and traveling to Mars.
Yeah.
Super far-fetched. And then there was another one that was talking about, the use of psychics by the CIA, which
Yeah.
in general, we were talking before starting this podcast that it seems very weird and like surreal that the CIA would invest a lot of money in things that are not so fact-based, that
For
I don't
sure.
it is just a bit crazy. But I think it was an interesting article about the one about the use of psychics during the Cold War period.
Yeah. So like that. I think you're talking about the one that I sent you about the crisis that they had in Iran with the hostages.
Hostages.
Yeah, I didn't read that much into that one, but I think it's the some people say that the hostage crisis in Iran, which is when I think some Iranian rebels during or uh, after before the revolution, whatever, they just invaded the U.S. embassy and they held them hostage uh, for like years. And like this psychic guy was saying how he actually transported to the embassy so he
Well,
could
theory,
and like
I think that
and
they recruited a lot of them were actually soldiers, not necessarily psychics. They recruited people who escaped tragedies that were inescapable because they believed that they had naturally heightened instincts and maybe possibly had psychic abilities. So people who somehow escaped like plane crashes at war or situations when like there was a hostage situation and people were killed, but they somehow escaped. And a lot of the times on the account when they were saying how they escaped, it's because like they kind of like had a vision. They didn't realize that they were psychic, but the CIA believed
yeah,
them to be psychic because of those visions. And but it's crazy because it was literally like 50-50. It was only half of the times when they actually predicted, um, like they actually saw accurate information, but a lot of the time
yeah,
they were completely wrong. And a lot of people see this period of the CIA as like a complete failure, and not something they really want to talk about or go back to. But it just kind of goes to show how much the CIA, or like secret agencies believe in this power of mind and how you could actually maybe
yeah,
control it yourself, whereas you can transport yourself to places or situations you're not actually present physically, and also
yeah.
maybe it could be controlled, which is insane.
It's insane, and it sounds like I don't blame anyone who is just a bit skeptical towards them, because even though like I got a glimpse of it, usually when you're having those experiences, it's not easy to direct them in a certain way. And I don't know exactly if the goal of the CIA is trying to study how astral projection can mean that you can, for example, project yourself in Mars, or project yourself at a future event, or if you could just travel in space and time extremely fastly. Like, I'm not sure if the that the power that they're trying to harness is actually harnessable. You know, like these things, they're just like too many crazy processes in our brains, and I don't think they can be directed as such by anyone. Um, but yeah, like I don't know. It's
We move on to drugs.
yeah.
Because there's two
Uh,
drugs we're going to talk about in this episode. One of them is LSD, and then the other one is scopolamine, which is also known as is it the devil's breath or devil's
the
dust?
devil's breath.
Devil's
Yeah.
breath. Um, and yeah, two of them go very far back to their usage goes very far back to the Nazi Germany. And both of them were said to be used during the interrogation in concentration camps. And then LSD was apparently also used by USSR, well, the Soviet Union, in the Cold War. And that's how it kind of the gossip of it got to the US and to the CIA, particularly to the man called Sidney Gottlieb. And he was the director of the project called MK Ultra. And he actually, well, he believed that the Russian spies have been given LSD, and that's how their mind is being controlled by the Russian government. And there were
Russian spies were given LSD by.
so yeah, he thought that the Russian government, the way they control their spies is by the use of LSD.
Okay.
And so what he wanted to do, he wanted obviously to train his own soldiers to be kind of like killing machines.
And because like what's the LSD there LSD meant to do? Like what exactly is it
Well, that's
trying to
the thing,
achieve? Is it
LSD as a
making the
substance
spy more
was not available in the US, so they had completely no clue as to what it actually did.
right? Because I think
It
what
was
it could do, like, because I heard recently something about really intense LSD experiences. Um, what they do is they put you in a similar state. I think that what the sound tapes try to do.
yeah,
It's as if like again your brain just you know is just drenched in water now, and it's just like creating different synapses. And I think that this power somehow they think that it can be harnessed,
but the
and
thing is that
somehow it can, for example, mean that you can um,
no, but they didn't
access
know this back then.
a different space. Or because
Basically,
like maybe if you combine this with the sound therapy, it could mean that like
yeah, they
you could
didn't know.
travel in time and space. I don't know.
They truly didn't know what LSD does back then, and that was the whole purpose of the research. It was an experiment. Well, because also weed used to be used in interrogations, because people thought before they
Weed.
yeah, people used to think that weed is kind of a truth serum, and then they realized people would make
Ow.
confessions that weren't true. Well, that's the thing, because they didn't realize completely how it works. You know, the CIA has a history of
Yeah.
trying different drugs on people to see if they could create like the perfect truth serum or the perfect mind control
Yeah.
drug. And yeah, so what is funny in general is that Gottlieb got LSD from all over the world because he wanted to get different types of LSD
Right.
in order to check them all. And this is how LSD became popularized in the US, and in the end was used by like Allen Ginsberg and all
So
the
the CIA guy who first
men.
came with it was the CIA guy who first brought LSD to the
And
US.
he brought it on a mass level, and he well, the ethical issue of this experiment is he didn't tell anyone what the purpose of their experiment was, and he also didn't tell many people that he was using LSD. So
Right.
he recruited a lot of prisoners who unknowingly consumed LSD every day for a year.
Unknowingly consumed LSD for over
Yeah,
a year.
so there is actually a documentary that I'm going to link in the YouTube video about people who later on sued the US government. There is a story of a woman who is suffering from a really bad postpartum, and she signed up for a project that she thought is going to relieve her depression. But actually, she was fed LSD. It was a part of the MK Ultra, and she was fed LSD for a year every day, which
And she was a
completely
prisoner, sorry.
mind. Uh, and yeah, she was like unable to work afterwards. She's unable to focus now, and she ended up suing the government for like loss of her life, basically.
But like, how are they, was she a prisoner?
No,
But how are they like checking on it, like the effects of the LSD if they were feeding her LSD every day? Like, well, how are they monitoring? Like, what was this study? You know,
basically,
like
the
it's
premise of the experiment is you tell different people they're taking part in a different experiment.
right,
So you don't tell them what actual risks are. They don't have to sign anything. Every person kind of is given a different explanation. Some people think they're, it's like an experimental drugs for depression.
oh,
So you're still
right,
in for checkups. You're
right, I see,
like part of the project is just you don't know the severity of like the possible consequences. You don't really know what you're
right.
signing for. That's what was like the big unethical part of the project. And the reason why it eventually came to an end, because one of the agents actually ended up committing suicide after being fed big doses of LSD and jumping out of the window. And that's what kind of brought the
And
project.
they were feeding them big doses, like because they're not like just giving it a little dab of LSD to people, right? From what you're telling me, like
It varied. Like it truly, there was no, from what I was reading, there is no one kind of procedure they were following. There were different groups of people to which they were giving different amounts of LSD.
that's crazy.
So how it got popular is later was a lot of the participant actually got quite addicted. Well, not addicted, but they enjoyed the feeling of it. And then they started, post the experiment, they started buying LSD after it
Huh?
implied that that's what they were using. And then one of those people was Allen Ginsberg, who then kind of led the like anti-government movement, which is just kind of funny.
Right.
That works out. But yeah, it was, I don't know. It was really, really crazy.
And but you were saying like the ethical implications of it is just crazy. Like, and is what you were saying as well. You can't really see a clear motivation for just drugging up the whole population in this sense, and it's just it sounds a bit like I had no idea what they were trying to achieve.
Well, I think it's
Uh,
because I think
because
the
then,
Bourne movies, the Bourne, that's how you pronounce it, the Bourne movies are
yeah,
kind of loosely based on this, where you just try to um, also create a perfect weapon, but also, yeah, another thing, they were thinking that if they could catch Russian spies, well, Soviet spies, then maybe they were thinking that they could reverse the mind control by feeding them LSD. I'm not
right,
sure how that was meant to work, but they thought that that's the way of getting important information on their enemy.
yeah,
And like
yeah, it's crazy.
interviewing the spies, which is insane. There was also there is another project within MK Ultra called Operation Midnight Climax, where they cooperated with prostitutes, and they asked them to like lure men into this hotel rooms, which would have, the glass where from one side is a mirror and you can see like
Yeah,
it from the other side. So yeah, on the other side of the mirror, agents would be sitting and seeing these prostitutes basically like feeding the clients LSD. Obviously, the clients didn't know, and then like having sex with them. I don't
and they
really
would be
know what the
watching all of
of
this.
it was, but yeah, that was
That
also.
sounds too crazy. Like, because what I was thinking, like in my head, the only way MK Ultra makes sense in this sort of idea that you know uh, we were talking about of creating the perfect spy. The only way I think it makes sense is if you mix it with the gateway experience,
Yeah.
because the gateway experience to me seems like it's sort of channeling you to say travel in space. for example, there's an article that I sent that was talking about this guy who was part of the process, the experiments, and he talks about how he went to Mars, and he saw pyramids and strange shapes and figures. So I was thinking, like, the only way you can sort of get that is probably through a mix of LSD with the gateway experience.
Well,
Like,
either that or because this is something.
because other than that, I don't see a point for MK Ultra. Like, if it's
But
just
what if, I think that they might have thought that LSD has similar effects to scopolamine. Because, and this is kind of what we could talk about now, because this is what I find really interesting. And I read quite a bit upon it, and I listened to like interviews with scientists, and a lot of them disagree that this drug could even have this effect, but it somehow does.
it's the devil's breath you're
It is
talking about.
devil's breath, and yeah, it is used. It is apparently commonly used in Colombia. But then when you interview people, there is a Vice documentary on it. When you interview people, not many of them have personally been affected by it, but they know someone that knows someone that has. But there are stories of people like robbing their own apartments, whereas someone gives you scopolamine, and then apparently you're so susceptible to what they're saying to you that you could help the robbers take out stuff from your apartment.
Yeah.
And then don't remember.
It's a zombie drug. It turns you into a zombie, literally, right?
Yes. Which is, I don't know. It's crazy that something like this even exists. And like some scientists say that it cannot possibly work like that, but then there's people that have been affected by it. So yeah, I don't know. It is really crazy.
It is like,
It's also been used in the Nazi Germany.
because it's like, again, perfect for interrogation, right?
It's been used in criminal cases.
It's actually a better drug for interrogating people than LSD is, right? It's much better. Like, under LSD, I'm not sure if people would just like.
Yeah. Well, what is funny as well is also, well, not funny, but the devil's breath, well, the scopolamine is also how the truth serum was first coined as a term. Because obviously there is no such drug as a truth serum, but it's actually a combination. Legally, there's it's a name for a combination of two drugs of either morphine and scopolamine or mescaline and scopolamine.
And that's a truth serum.
Yeah, and it's called the truth serum because it used to be used in the interrogations, again in the Nazi Germany, but apparently it's also being used right now in the interrogation of terrorists or people suspected of terrorism in the post 9/11 world.
Yeah, I mean, is that sort of, because with the you said there's mescaline in it, right? As
yes.
well.
But then it is in the truth serum used for interrogation, but then scopolamine as it is used in Colombia, it's not mixed with anything else.
Right.
And apparently how it works, it's the people that have been affected by it, they all said that it's just done like in a paper. Let's say someone comes up to you and they give you a piece of paper or like a map to look at, and they just kind of flush it at you, and it's the powder that gets into your nose. I's documentary also follows, well, it has this interview with one of the sex workers that uses it to steal from her clients. And how she uses it, she puts like cotton buds up her nose, so whenever she does this, she's not affected by it.
Right.
And she also recalls like actually killing people with it because too big of it.
What you were saying about like how they were using it in interrogations after 9/11, right? Is it like how exactly did that happen? You know, were they just administering this to people and extracting confessions from them?
Basically, well,
and that's like documented.
It's been given to people in order to either extract confessions, and then it works in a similar basis than the MK Ultra was supposed to work. So it kind of believes that the people who are in the terrorist groups have been mind controlled by either the way, just because like they believe it's a cult, and they somehow believe that like the head of the terrorist organizations mind control the people that later commit the like suicide bombing attacks and all that. So they believe that maybe by giving them the truth serum, they can actually tell them
like to sort of
yeah, like
de-brainwash them, as it were.
control them in a sense, mind control them.
I see. And because I mean, when people talk about terrorists as well, they talk about how they, people who join terrorist groups, people say they're brainwashed, and there's this whole ideology that comes with terrorism that's, worshiping, for instance, the Islamic State, and then you just have to start believing, for example, that your own country is your enemy, and that, like, for the person to start believing in that, that's a process of brainwashing has to happen, right?
Yeah,
And
I think the reason why now the truth serum is used is because, yeah, as you're saying, that there is a
and then the
belief.
truth serum just gets the person to get rid of that, I guess, right? Or
Well, yeah, but at the same time, a lot of the times people you interview are not terrorists, they're terrorist suspects. And a lot of the times in the world we live today, they're just going to be brown people. They don't even have to be Muslim, and they don't even have to be Arab. They will just, because it is like they will just be racially profiled and maybe,
yeah, and then
suspected.
they're targeted, and what you're saying is
And there's actually been cases, it wasn't with the use of truth serum, but this like CIA, FBI, they tried to like brainwash people that they suspected of terrorism by the typical brainwashing activities, like locking someone in a small room, waterboarding them, all that regular stuff.
yeah,
And a lot of people actually would come to admit to things that they've never done. And apparently later it was said that it was not only because of the pressure of, like waterboarding and the possibility of death that they would
yeah,
admit to being part of these organizations, but it was because they sometimes would actually believe after some point that they are somehow a part of a terrorist organization.
because that's
Could actually be brainwashed to believe it.
yeah,
All these activities, a lot of the times, they will make someone confess
yeah,
that it was.
because like your memories, they probably just, it's what you were we were talking about this. I don't think we were recording this, but you're saying like our memories are actually not very solid things. We tend to forget things very easily, and it could very well be the case that with a certain memory they have that's not very clear in your head.
Well, that's
Someone could just come in and tell you that you did something, and then because of some weird brain processing, you actually believe that you did that and you confess to that.
yeah. Well, the
You know
truth
what I mean?
is, most of our memories are not our memories, apparently. So the strongest memories and the ones that are the most plausible are the ones connected to places, because that's how apparently what we remember most, like space and place. And then some connected to very strong emotions. And
Yeah.
there were a lot of experiments done on people that experienced, well, people were asked to say how they remembered 9/11 and what they did on that day. And I think 40% of participants remembered it incorrectly. So people would say that they've seen the plane hit the towers. They would say that they saw smoke. There would be different accounts of what happened. And then the scientists would go back and check whether this was possible, that those people saw it. And people were actually sometimes in different places, out of the country.
They weren't even there. They weren't even seeing it.
One was saying she saw the smoke and she saw it from the distance. Her classroom window at the time was actually facing a wall. So she couldn't have.
And people just think it happened.
The people
Like right next, that's crazy.
happened.
And they have this memory of it, right? That's what's
Yeah,
crazy as
so
well.
these
Like
will be
they can
very vivid
visualize.
memories. A lot of them would be, we will take them as memories, but they're going to be things we heard on TV. They're going to be things our relative told us, something we saw in a picture,
Yeah,
something that actually happened in a reality TV series, but we took it as our own memory. Um,
yeah,
so we can't actually trust a lot of the things we remember, which is crazy because our memories are like such a solid basis for many legal cases and testimonies, but
for
they're
sure.
extremely unreliable.
So you're
And
saying like, and there's a procedure that they do to basically make someone believe in something that they never did,
yeah, so
and believe that they did something that they never did, rather.
there is an experiment done by Shaw and Porter. It's called Constructing Rich Falls Memories of Committing Crime.
Right.
Um, and as a result, 70% of participants had false memories of committing crime and admitted to doing so. Um,
Wow.
and how it basically worked is they interrogated a bunch of people and they didn't tell them that that was the purpose of the experiment because obviously that would affect the experiment negatively. They told them that they just want to test like human brain activity and that they want to test how far your brain can remember things.
Hmm.
They would ask the permission of all the participants to send questionnaires to their relatives about past memories so they can see if they would remember things. So when the questioners came back, what they did is they um, gave them two actual memories. So they were like, oh, you fell off a bench when you were younger, you know, and like broke your leg. So if it was something that happened, and they were like, oh yeah, shit, I remember that. And there would be another memory of like, I don't know, you went to a bank with your dad and the banker had a heart attack, which is kind of insane. But yeah, and they were like, oh shit, that did happen. And these were
Yeah.
actual memories. And then as a third memory, they would present to them a crime. And they were like, you know, when you were 14, most of the participants were 20, 22 years old. And then they would all tell them that when they were 14, they committed a crime. And there were, I think, 3 times of the crime that they presented them with, but some of them were like aggravated assault crimes. So like intense situations.
Like intense situations that, like, of course you would have remembered
Yes.
if you did that.
And
So
so they were like, okay, so you committed this crime. You actually had to go like to jail for one night for this or whatever. They would tell them this. And upon the first session, everyone was like, what? Really? No, like it's impossible. But then
yeah, of
the,
course.
the scientists would tell them, okay, so just think about it. We're going to meet in 2 weeks, but it's important for us to see if our brain can remember things. And a lot of the times after the 2 weeks when people came back, they could recall details that were never given to them by the interrogators. So they could say like how
Shit.
someone looked, what they asked them of, and they truly believed that they committed the crime.
Shit.
And this was
But
basically done to kind of show how impossible it is to trust witness testimonies when putting people away or
yeah.
to jail, because most of them, especially with in a line of questioning that's very suggestive, people will believe whatever the police wants you to believe they saw.
And that's what it takes, right? It doesn't really take, like, because you're saying like
Testing.
it doesn't really take someone feeding you LSD or a truth serum for that to happen, right? Uh, you just start believing in something that you never did, if people, everyone around you maybe starts acting as if you did that, right?
But there is also a case, I don't remember what the case was called. I can look it up and put it in the comments section later. But there was a case of a woman who was raped, and she was presented with a line of people that were possible perpetrators. And she picked someone that she wasn't convinced because it was like done in the dark. And she picked someone who she thought maybe, but she wasn't convinced, was the guy responsible. And after she did that, the police was like, oh yes, this is exactly who we thought it was. So her thought process was was confirmed. She was like, oh, then it is him for sure. And
Yeah.
actually, after 10 years of this guy being in prison, her DNA was tested again, like the DNA found inside her, the sperm sample, and it
Yeah.
was a different guy in that lineup.
It was a different guy.
Yeah. So it was only because she was also convinced that like the police officers, the way they questioned her, they kind of let her,
Oh, they convinced her that it was
and they
someone
were like,
else.
oh, this is who we thought it was. She just
Yeah,
went with it. And then in the end of the day, it was someone else in that lineup who raped.
yeah,
But like an innocent guy went to prison for 10 years.
that's insane. So
Yeah.
it's like, I don't know, like memories, as we were saying, like they just seem like they come and go so easily, you know, and like we tend to forget things so easily that it's entirely possible that they can just be implanted and we just start believing in things just because, I mean, to me at least, I don't feel like my memories are particularly solid, you know.
Yeah.
Um, my memory is shit, but you know, it's crazy to think that like if people started telling me that I did something I never did, I could just end up believing in that and confessing to that as if I did it. Which, you know, it's
That's kind of like why I think it is a way of controlling your mind, because controlling your memories is essentially controlling your mind, especially when you believe in
yeah.
and then act accordingly in your future life. Like you act as if you've hurt someone. Like I don't know. And if you can implant memories, can you implant memories that result in you wanting certain things from life, or like having needs that you wouldn't otherwise have?
Mm,
And
yeah, for sure.
crazy.
It's insane. And like I
Oh,
think
I just wanted to say one more thing about it because that's quite important as well, I think, is how our brain remembers it. I think they're called either honest lies or pseudo memories, and they're almost indistinguishable. So if someone would want to
pseudo
check
lies.
your brain, yeah, if someone would want to check your brain activity to see maybe if what you're saying is a lie, it doesn't register in your brain as a lie. It registers in the same way a real memory would be registered. So it's impossible to say like
Oh,
brain activity. It's impossible to tell like the pseudo memory and the real memories apart.
so your
That's why
brain
it's
basically
so
doesn't tell the difference.
no, that's why it's like, yeah, because there's no way to check it.
Yeah. So what happens is you just get fed lies and they just go to the same channel that processes
Yeah,
memories and it just becomes part of one thing
yeah.
and
You
it's
basically
just a
end up with like
brain issue that we all have.
false consciousness.
Like the brain is so weird as well. Like it's so full of these
It's a bit
weird
vague.
connections that they can just be like, I think that's partly what we're talking about, how certain brain connections, it feels like they can be rewired in a certain way. Like this thing you were talking about, memories and lies, you know, like they're just not very distinguishable for our
Bro, you know
brains.
what I also remember? This is the craziest part. So this experiment was done after other experiments that weren't connected to crime. And the researchers have been able to plant different memories in people. And some people believed they were having tea with Prince Charles.
What?
Yeah, people were literally like be convinced that they have. So yeah, some of it was like getting lost in a mall, cheating on a recent test. Some of them believe they've been attacked by a vicious animal. But the
What?
Prince Charles is just like the cherry on top of it.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
what?
like crazy stuff, and
Yeah,
it's like,
it's like, oh, let's think was one of the most probably like improbable ways to happen. Tea with Prince Charles, and yeah, sure. What?
but so wait, I just don't get it. What you're saying is that these people who are believing in all these things, they were having those memories implanted. Like for example, in the 9/11 situation that we were talking about, like
No,
say you
the
know in
9/11
Guantanamo Bay they do that, and that's actual like
Oh, so
people.
the 9/11 situation was just kind of to present you with how our mind works and how unreliable memories are. Just that they will change
Right.
and you will, it's so easily influenced that people will just see footage from TV and then register them as like years later as their own memory. And that's
Yeah.
how the brain works. And then the researchers kind of just plant a single thought or like two sentences in your mind, and then what your brain does, it based on your other experiences or things you've seen, it will build upon that sentence or two and create a memory.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's why, like, a lot of the things that people report back on, like how the police officer looked or what the conversation looked like, it was never told to them by the researchers. It would be their own
Yeah.
brain based on maybe something they've heard or saw on TV, kind of making up the
Mm.
memory.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's insane.
I know. I don't know if I can trust myself after researching all that. Like, this week has been intense because I've read
Yeah.
so much.
It's
I don't
it's
know.
such crazy research that we were doing. This whole talk of mind control is a bit. It's a bit of a rabbit hole, you know. There's so many different divergence, and you know, you start reading about people who you were saying, you know, like start believing that they had tea with Prince Charles. I was reading about this guy who thought he went to Mars,
Yeah.
and it's all like it sounds like people are just going crazy and just reporting that to you. And yeah, because I mean, it's basically insanity, right? To say that, you know, you actually had tea with Prince Charles. It's basically insanity to say that, you know, you traveled to Mars and you saw pyramids there, right? But what's crazy as well is that these things are studied, and like we're starting to understand the science behind it, and it all gets very confusing then because it leaves you in a place like shit, you know.
I mean, there is that, and these are kind of experiments that we could see as far away from us, and obviously the memories, a lot of our memories possibly or for sure not being real is quite a scary part. But I think the scariest of part of it all is what I think we should talk about now. Is, yeah, propaganda and the current
Yeah.
systems we live in that influence us on a daily basis and that have kind of gone into our consciousness or subconsciousness
Yeah,
to a level where we don't even acknowledge them anymore.
I think, you know, with propaganda and ideology, one thing that's very clear to me is how everything that we get fed socially, in our daily lives, is everything that we consume, everything that we watch on TV, everything that we see on social media, and so on. This all basically structures a view of self, right? So you have, for instance, you know, someone telling you what to buy, and then you go buy that, and then you associate yourself with a certain image, and
Yeah,
that's all constructed socially, right?
yeah.
Uh,
And like
and I think propaganda understands that really well. Essentially, how uh, you know, if you think about it, and you take this power that propaganda has, it's an immense power, right? Because once you start everyone, uh, once you get everyone to think of themselves in the same way, maybe, then you start having a cohesive society, for instance, right? And that's what like ideology does, right? It has this basic role for everyone, and everyone just ends up believing in it because they consume this sort of worldview, justifying their, you know, roles in the media and so on. And so what you have is just the creation of a society through propaganda, right?
but this is kind of
And escaping that,
yeah,
it throws you in a different space. That's what it, like I think is fascinating about it, because uh, as I was saying, like there's a view of self that you cultivate, and that gets like built after years and years, constructed, uh, and that view of self is different from like this more, you know, this outside self, really. So is what we were saying earlier, before recording as well, about the idea of the social self and the real self,
I mean, yeah, and that's like the whole basis as well for capitalism, right? Like, in order to sustain itself, it needs to feed us these needs, right? And things
yeah,
we would say, like, oh, I might want that. It has to transform it into I need that in order to be fulfilled, in order to have this certain lifestyle, in order to even like be a human.
yeah, And that's a form of mind control, as you were saying. And I think it's connected to what we were saying as well, because when you think about, you know, forms of escaping ideology, you get very close to that talk of, uh, astral projection and transcending what it means to exist in society and just exist for yourself, and I think like thinking of your personality, as it were, outside of ideology is an immense effort, right? And
Well, it is
because it's on so many levels, it's
how
such a
it works
big unit of analysis, ideology.
because it no longer is about you, it's about a whole society. And then if you don't conform, you're going to be judged by that society. So it's no longer even whether you view yourself outside of the ideology of everyone still around you and the one like people close to you function within it.
Yeah,
And I think there's been like, yeah, Chomsky talks about this, like that we've all kind of signed this unwritten social contract, and we've just accepted that we are going to be manipulated, and we're okay with it at this point.
yeah.
That's how
Like
it's.
so many people are just okay with it at this point, right? Like, with we always complain that Facebook and Instagram is listening to us, but like there's an element of us that also wants that control, right? That there's an element of us to like actually, because of the products that they recommend after listening to our conversations, like we want that.
You know what?
There's no reason. It's not. And that's why I think is interesting as well, because so many of these processes that we're talking about, um, and especially when they're related to technology, right? Um, this form of mind control is something that we all accepted, right? It's something that we all bought into. But I think it's just because we love technology and we have such close connection with technology. We're very susceptible to like just
Well, I
you
think,
know
yeah, the way I think, yeah, there's, I don't know in what book he talks about it, but Chomsky has like 10 ways of media control, or like how media controls our mind.
yeah.
And one of the ways is you create a problem just to solve it later. And I think that's kind of also in terms of like creating certain needs is like you create a problem, let's say like legs on a woman, like not legs, sorry, like hair, like hair on a woman.
Yeah,
It's not a problem, but you pose it as a problem, even though no one
yeah,
ever looked into it, and all of a sudden, yeah, like people hate when you have kind of hairy legs, you should do something about it. And then it presents you with a solution. Oh, here's this beautiful razor you can buy, and
right.
how you can conform. So it's about creating issues that were never there just to create needs in order to
Yeah,
conform. And that
to
is,
get us to buy things and
and
to
that's super
just to
interesting as well in terms of colonization, because by the end of the colonial times, how kind of well, it's not necessarily how that's, but a part of like how we continued, by me I mean Western countries, neo-colonial relationships with the ex-colonies is by imposing Western beauty standards. Like one of the ways was imposing Western beauty standards on women, and then creating these needs, and then kind of creating the link of capital, between
yeah,
the country and the colonial, well, not between the colonial power and the colony.
yeah,
And it's also interesting because some people would say, oh, but in the Western society, there was always a certain idea of beauty. But then it's just so visible when you look at the ex-colonies and how there were totally different ideas of beauty. But all of a sudden,
yeah.
everyone is influenced to want to look like a typical white person,
That's what's fascinating to me, because it's a different way of living, right? So
Yeah.
it's not only the way you look, for instance, but it's also the way uh, I don't know, politics works, for example, and the way the society is organized. All these things, they are different in an original sense, maybe, but then they just become um, conforming to the ideology because of these, processes of colonization. So now you have basically the extinction of all these different systems and everyone just living under the same sort of rigid ideology.
You know what really
And,
scares
and what that means is that, like, to me, the most fascinating thing,
me?
is just to think that, like, there are other possibilities of structuring reality, right? Reality could be structured differently,
So many ways.
essentially. And that it's a completely different, there were societies who existed with a completely different logic compared to the logic that we live, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you just look at ancient
They're definitely
civilizations, they had the
ridiculous.
weirdest customs, right?
I mean, no, what I was just gonna say, it was kind of scares me is that I'm aware of all these things, right? Like we're talking about it now, which means I'm aware of the fact of how it works. But I will still I still do this. Like I still have a certain idea of who I am and of like a brand that I have, which is insane
Yeah,
because I'm just a human. But within like the capitalist society, I look at myself as a brand. And
yeah,
I will still want to buy things and I feel like, oh, like I need this thing, to have this certain look. And it will, and it's not clothes anymore because I don't really want to buy them anymore, but I will be like, I need to like read this book. And sometimes it's not because I really want the knowledge in it. It just also suits the way how I think and what I talk about.
yeah.
All
So
about,
it's a question of image, right?
and then it's
That we
also
care about.
brand. And even if no one else is looking, I still uphold that brand to myself and I will still
Yeah,
look for things that fit that. And it's ridiculous. And
yeah.
it scares me because I'm like, well, I realize it all, but I still do this. Am I being fucking, how is it still the mind control device is still
I,
working on me? How am
I
I
don't think
so
I don't
in,
think you can blame yourself for doing these things because we all exist under it, right? We all have to adhere to this logic, because we don't even know what it's like on the other side, right? We don't even know what it's like because that's what ideology does, and that's why I think it's connected to what everything we were talking about. It it it's a form of consciousness, basically, right? It's what Marx would call false consciousness.
yeah.
It's a warped view of reality. It's not reality as it really is, right? Ideology is an inversion of reality, is how they like to talk about it. And reality as it really is, it's really inaccessible. And just to go back to like what we were saying, just so it's not too loose, I think um, what we were talking about, these experiences of hemisync and trying to transcend and astral projection and all these things, they're really relevant, and they're really relevant for this debate that we're having now because um, these experiences, and I'm also talking about psychedelic experiences, they can teach you they can teach you exactly how to separate and how to like visualize exactly what your social self is and what your real self is. And they give you a real separation. Like psychedelic mushrooms, for example, they have this uh, power of making you just like super insightful about these issues. And you just get what they call ego death. And that's a fascinating idea to me because what we were talking about is essentially our ego, right? We have certain desires and certain things, but who we really are, it might be something else. And what it does, and what these substances do, especially living under a capitalist system where, your desires, your ego is structured by, capitalist wants and needs and so on. Uh, it's important to get that other view of yourself, I think. And that's what I think the whole debate about ideology is about realizing this difference between two versions of self, really.
Well, but my thing is, even when you realize it, it's not something you can escape. Because I remember
Yeah,
we watched the Pervert's Guide to Ideology, the
yeah,
Zizek movie, and then in that movie he talks about another movie that we've also seen, and I would recommend for everyone to watch. It's called They Live, um,
yeah,
and it's about this guy who finds this pair of glasses, and when he puts them on, he sees the reality, kind of. So he sees let's say previously there would be an ad with like a naked lady and Coca-Cola, and when he puts the glasses on, it's just a sign that says obey. And then when he introduces the glasses to other people, they all don't want to see it. They kind of want to turn, they want to take the glasses down. It's too much for them, right? Which kind of gives you this idea of like, oh, people are like live in certain ideologies, but they don't want to know the truth. They don't want to know the true self.
Yeah, we really don't want to know it. Like we
I
feel
like
really comfortable.
And I've seen it, and I still can't escape it. And I don't know if there is a way, it's so embedded in my reality and in my mom's reality and in everyone's around me. So like, if I've seen it, I can't help but function within it.
Yeah, it's such a hard question because, you know, if you know what it's like to, we probably do, that's why we probably don't know what it's like to live in any other sort of culture system, that we're just so used to, you know, buying stuff and associating that with our image, and you know, the cogs in the system, they just keep running because of that. We're just so used to this reality that we can't even picture what it's like on you know, society on the other side, say. And yeah, like one thing that I was always fascinated by was exactly how social revolutions work, right? And social revolutions, they have a goal, perhaps, of trying to enact such a change in how the individual views himself. Because if you're talking, for instance, about a communist revolution, what has to happen really is for us to escape this logic, right? We can't live under this logic and have a communist society functioning, right? For a communist society to function, everyone has to be selfless, right?
I mean,
and so
like
this is a different
revolutions.
Sorry?
I think this is the truth for all revolutions, because you kind of have to realize the like false common consciousness, or like the
and they all have to like teach the person, the individual person, how to think differently, almost, right? They have to rewire their brain somehow and make that person start you know, stop acting for him or herself and start acting for the collective, or whatever, you know,
I think what you're
higher
saying
order.
in general is quite interesting as well for the current situation in Poland. Because, you know, I'm kind of in my little bubble, and, you know, people are very pro-abortion, and we're trying to make a change. And yeah, the protests gathered quite a lot of people, but then you have such a big part of the population that is so against it still. And it was very hard for me to realize why. And then I just kind of saw how, you know, a lot of these people are very religious, and it's an institution. And in order to kind of even allow yourself to think independently within the like church ideology, you would have to first reject church, you know, and you would have to like reject all of your realities in order to support this other cause. And it's just quite impossible. And I don't really even know how to start to rewire, as you say, these people's brains not to think that way anymore, you know?
It's super hard, and that's where like Marxism almost gets a bit ugly, you know, because it starts talking about how you know, beliefs should be done away with, and like religious beliefs, for instance, and like we should simply like ban religion so people stop thinking religiously.
Well, that's different.
But I think that's like the wrong way of approaching it, you know. I think it's never as if, for instance, abortion couldn't be conciliated with religion.
Well, of course,
It might not be conciliated with a certain type of
but I think
religion.
like in relation to Marxism, you need to think about the times. And I think a lot of the times it was like in non-secular countries where the church was so connected to the government. It's an institution like it is right now in Poland. So it's not an issue necessarily with religion or beliefs per se, but rather the way it's organized and the way it's like complementary kind of
Yeah, for sure.
ruling power.
Yeah, because the state is gonna use religion for its purposes, and then like religion becomes something completely alien to what its message really should be about. And like I'm sure if like you know, people really understood religion, they wouldn't have anything against
I think
abortion,
also,
right? It's not like religion is not meant to make people for or against like these issues. I think it's something a lot more
it's a step
connected to like
here, but I think we kind of made a full circle because I just kind of thought about the experiment you were talking about in the beginning, um,
yeah.
the gateway experiment, and how it would be funny to see if, well, it's probably not the case. This is a big conspiracy, guys. But if a church, a Catholic church as an institution, use this similar messaging processes, and even if it doesn't,
Well,
you go, because you go to church, let's say if you're super religious, at least once a week, right? Every Sunday. And apart from all the religious messages, you get like a big part of the mass when some priest just tells you how to think, basically. They read
yeah.
part of the Bible, they interpret the way they want it. Because my family's religious, I've been to quite a few masses, and sometimes they will literally link it to politics and current political situations. So they do the big mind control in that
Yeah, for sure.
space and time. And if you hear that, let's say, either once a week or a few times a week, your brain is bound to start thinking differently, right?
Yeah.
It would be funny if they also used the gateway process.
Yeah.
Imagine like the
Because
church
I mean,
background, low music.
imagine like, because some people talk about these things as religious experiences as well. I don't know, you know. And yeah, under ideology, religion just becomes something, as you said perfectly. You know, it just becomes a tool of the state and ultimately of capital and capitalist ideology, right? It just reinforces that. But it's never about, I think, extinguishing it just because it acts that way. It's always about a sort of conciliating, say abortion with, the current state of, society and religion. These things are not extreme opposites, and I think that's where the ideology debate gets a bit complicated sometimes, because sometimes people think that uh, one thing has to be exterminated for the other thing to come next, right? And it's never really that way. Uh, Things like somehow they end up coexisting always, And I don't know, even with like capitalist and communist ideologies, right? Um, you have like the example of China. It's never really doing away with something. The harder you try to do away with capitalist ideology, inevitably comes back, and
I think it would be
the
cool
opposite is true. I don't know.
to have a separate episode on ideologies.
Yeah,
Because it's such a broad topic, and we could like go for also different philosophies on it.
it's my main topic of like research. It was my main topic of research at
That's
uni.
why I want to talk to you about it, because I'm still, I'm taking baby steps in that field. I wouldn't say it's quite,
Yeah,
but it's not something I like explored deeply, and I know that's something you've been um
yeah,
looking at.
and like to me, it's fascinating because as I was saying, I think we're almost brought to full circle here because uh, what we were saying about ideology and how it, structures our view of self and our view of social reality. This is something different from what reality really is like. And it's again this idea of the two worlds problem almost, right? Uh, it's again a question of transcending, um, the dimension that we observe and going into something new, right? And I think that's really sort of the power of these tools that we were talking about, like hemisync and psychedelic drugs. Like it's never really for the opposite purpose, I think.
Okay, plot twist. This whole episode was mind control.
Yeah.
Now you are all our slaves. And you should do what
Control.
we say.
Yeah.
Imagine
Like I,
what happened. Shit, Leo, we could have played these tapes in the background, and then
yeah.
I don't know. Now we could have had a full army of people just doing whatever we want them to do.
Like I genuinely feel that if I invest in
We
this
shouldn't
and I
be like
listen
slaves.
fully to the tapes,
Yeah.
I'll become a psychic spy for sure.
Should become
Like I feel as if time travel is possible. Like I might be sounding fucking crazy now, but like after listening to these tapes, trust me that something different happens.
Yeah, I don't want to trust you after you're listening to these tapes. But wait, because we're kind of at the end, I just wanted to say that yeah, you should follow us on Instagram, because today we posted that we're gonna do an episode on mind control, and we asked people to ask us questions. We only got
Yeah, we have questions.
but I think, yeah, it would be cool for our next episode as well, which we don't even know what's going to be about yet. We're going to post about it, and maybe you guys could ask some questions, because we did want to add it as a segment to our podcast.
Yeah.
The only questions we got today, first
What
of
was the first question?
was, can I mind control my friends? And the answer to it is yes, you can. If it's
You
ethical,
probably could.
it's a different question. But yeah, I would just say, and I'm saying it if the police ever finds it, I didn't advise anyone to actually do it, but you in theory could get your hands on some scopolamine. You know, no, I'm not, you shouldn't do that. This is very dangerous. You could probably kill someone with it. But
Yeah, you should never like the true serum that you talked about. What's it called again? The Devil's Whisper. I wouldn't want to. Yeah, get
I mean,
near
you could
that.
also
I wouldn't
play
try and mind control anyone with that.
you could break into their house and play them the Gateway tapes in their
Yeah.
sleep.
Uh,
No, and you could mind.
you would totally invade their head. Like you would totally be able to then just implant some false memories in
This is how
someone
I got
if
you
you.
to do this podcast with me. I traveled to Brazil despite COVID. Bolsonaro helped
Yeah.
me, actually. He really hates me
Right.
because of all the articles you write. And he was like,
Yeah.
yeah, we're just going to get into Leo's head. And yeah, I did also plant some tapes about how you shouldn't write certain articles, you know, but it's fine.
Shit.
But one of
So
it was,
that's why we're doing this podcast.
please use his friend forever and record a podcast with her. And yeah,
Oh no.
now you're just
You got to my head.
I did.
You
Take
got to my head.
Wait, there is one more question. And this was the weird one. Sorry to who sent it, but it says, does fixating on mind control as conspiracy theory distract from real struggles per elite designs?
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier, right? And
Yeah, we basically
if there's anything, sorry, but if there's anything that we took or should be taken away from this podcast, is that in these processes, these studies were real. They were concrete studies that were being conducted by the CIA on the ground, and they were actually studying the scientific basis for these properties. So I think we have to begin to, think of these things not as some obscure, uh, you know, fringe conspiracy theory that's going on, but something that
because
people have actually studied and has been implemented, and it's caused damage to people.
and I think I think
Well,
especially when it comes to MK Ultra, it's a fact that the experiments did happen, and it's important because in a lot of these experiments, the most vulnerable parts of the population will always be used. Like in this case, it was people suffering from depression, people who are prisoners,
yeah,
in already extremely
it's
vulnerable
real.
positions. So it transcends kind of, and these are kind of real issues that will affect
Yeah,
people with less privilege inevitably. And it also kind of brings the whole debate of mind control to what we talked about later, so about ideology and propaganda,
for
and
sure.
we didn't talk about it at all, but I think in general the whole CIA mind control thing and propaganda is also just very interesting in terms of, post 9/11 and Bush's war on terror, and how that kind of mind control and mass panic by the media created the current racist society for most of the Western parts of the world, where but when there's so much violence directed, or like suspicion directed towards all Muslim people or Arab people.
Yeah.
So it is a
Because
real thing where a government, for certain decisions and alongside with media, can influence the whole public to act almost like dangerously towards certain groups of people, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Mind control happens, and it's just the way it happens, and the way we're talking about, you're talking about at least now, is sort of the government is telling you to believe in something, and that has real negative consequences. Maybe the more conspiratorial side of it would be, oh, so you're telling me that you know, mind control is real, and that, you know, I can just access you know, Mars all of a sudden because, you know, I'm listening to these crazy sounds and the CIA is telling me to do this. Like, that sounds a bit conspiratorial, I think, but these things are also not as unhinged as they may sound at first, because
But in general,
um, we just don't understand basically how the universe works as well. And like, I think that's a key takeaway from this as well. Sometimes we assume, you know, we have a certain view of reality that's concrete and so on, but we're just not almost able to see other possibilities in how, for example, you know, time travel could be possible.
I think
And there's some scientific backing behind this, and that's what we're trying to explain as
but I
well.
think even if you don't believe in that, you just, at least something that is just so freaking, at least should be obvious, and after this podcast, is how much of your life and of your deepest needs and desires are created by the outside world, because they're meant to appeal to your emotional side, you know, and like your insecurities. And I think, just doing your own research as well, you could even just how the Red Scare was presented in the US, you know, and how the whole narrative of like, hide your kids and hide your wife, they're coming, you know. It's almost, it always, even if it's not as direct, it's always just meant to appeal to your emotional side of like, oh my god, fuck, they're all, you know, the Soviets are coming, we need to protect
Yeah.
them. And you know, these are quite more of like explicit examples, but it works, at other levels, like what we talked about, the beauty industry and desires. So it's actually all around us, and it's about, even if we can't stop still having those desires and functioning within those ideologies, I think it's important to always stop and think about it. And even if you still decide to cave in, at least it's your choice, or like semi-choice.
Yeah.
Or
At least you're aware of it, right? At least, I think at least being aware is a huge advance, because I don't know, it brings benefits to you as well. So being aware that, you know, what ideology tells you you are essentially is not who you really are, is actually a good tool for mental health almost, you know, like but yeah. I think this was a good conversation we had.
I really enjoyed it.
We went into we talked about, you know, a lot of different topics, but I think, you know, we managed to talk about them and connect them in a certain way, you know, because even with the mind control stuff that we were talking about, that might seem far-fetched, um, you know, it's actually very tangible in these, you know, social processes that we talked about, you know, in ideology. So I think these are connected themes for sure.
You should, in this description box, I'm gonna put our social media, which is at this point only Instagram, and our email. But you should definitely email us or DM us if you either Yeah, if you have an idea about what you want us to talk about
Yeah,
next,
if you want to be invited,
but also
if
if there's a certain like research you're doing or something you're interested in, it's about your job, I don't know. If there's something you really want to talk about, yeah, it would be really cool to have you on our podcast
yeah,
and chat shit with us for an hour, 2 or 3. And yeah,
I really don't know how long we went.
oh, it's probably super fucking long. Well, okay.
Yeah,
It was a pleasure speaking to you guys, and yeah. Um,
it was great. I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation, and there's more crazy stuff coming for you, for
Okay.
sure.
Bye bye.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, subscribe. Click the subscribe
subscribe,
below. How do I stop?
like, and share the video. Do everything.